than wear a headset all day.
5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You're live. Hi, guys. I want to welcome you today to our YouTube Live event and Facebook Live. And I've got a guest with me today, Roger Nemeth, who's the CEO of both Tax Help Software. I think you guys call it Audit Detective, as I recall, is the real name.
Well, Audit Detective is the official corporate name, and the Tax Help Software, but it's not just for not just for audits. So we changed the name very early on.
And then also Tax Mentor, and we're going to talk a little later about our event coming up in August that we're joint sponsoring with Tax Mentor and Tax Help Software and our company, Private Tax Education, Private Tax Solutions. So I'm excited to talk about that. But Roger and I go way back. I think we were one of the first users of Tax Help Software. What was that, in the 1800s or so?
Yeah, 1853.
Yeah. When did you actually start Tax Help Software, Roger?
2009.
That's okay. So I don't think I was clear back then, but gosh, we
no. So we didn't start selling till 2014. So
that's when
2009 was
Yep. I know that because I was in another firm as a partner before we broke off and formed Private Tax Solutions and really focused our efforts. But I remember going to a conference, ASTPS, and they talked about it. You were kind of brand new to selling, and I got some, I don't remember, maybe you did a month-long demo or something, or we just got a user account for 30 days. I don't even remember the promo, but I was used to using the online application for the IRS e-services, and I'd been using e-services for years. But I remember loading the software, and then in 10 minutes, I think I did like 3 hours worth of downloading of transcripts, and I went, "Oh my goodness, this is amazing!" And I was all in at that point. So, how'd you get into doing Tax Help Software? What got you started, and what do you see the value right now as being?
So I used to manage a Jackson Hewitt franchise, and it was a CPA light franchise. It wasn't your retail EIC. We had an enrolled agent in every one of our locations, at least one. I think we even had Walmarts, and our Walmarts had.
Oh, you had a Walmart center. Interesting.
Yeah. We had like 6 or 7 of them. So had 20 some odd enrolled agents, and in the summertime, I sat behind 3 of them that would work in the off season, and I wasn't a tax guy. I was a manager. I felt like you could either do the work or you could do the managing. And I'd watch these guys. By the way. Yeah. Good luck.
Okay.
So, and I would watch them, and they would go to the fax machine, and they would sit there and wait, and they would wait, and then this paper would come in, like 50 pages. Then they'd sit at their desk for another couple hours and make spreadsheets. And I'm like, what in God's name are you doing? And they're like, I got to create these spreadsheets with all this tax data so I can know what's going on with the account. I'm like, buy something. There has to be something for this. So a week later, my assistant GM comes back and goes, "There's nothing." And I said, there's got to be something. You can't tell me that you have to go to the IRS, get a fax, and read it and type it into Excel. And
worse than that,
I swear to you,
call them first and faxing your transcript or something.
And back then they had,
in those days.
They did have the online POA back then, though.
That's right.
You could do the immediate online POA.
Which I'm still jaded by, because they promised they'd come out with something better. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, they haven't. But you had to have the AGI was the only trick. Right. That was the signature of the secret code, but nobody had the AGI. So I started making a spreadsheet that would import. Well, first I say, can we get these things digitally? And they're like, yeah, there's this e-service thing. Made everybody sign up for e-services. Then I said, what next? Well, you got to make a spreadsheet. So we built a spreadsheet. Yeah. So I wasn't a programmer per se. I ended up writing 70,000 lines of VBA code, if anybody knows what that is.
I know what VBA is.
Yeah. So over 4 years, I kept making it better. We were using it for like H&R Block's second look.
Okay.
Yeah, it was finding refunds and things like that. It was very primitive. And then a firm in Jacksonville called Tax Defense Network, which at the time was the largest resolution firm, and I was in Brunswick, Georgia, north of Savannah, actually just north of Jacksonville, where they were located. And they called me up, said, "We'd like to have lunch with you one day." So I drove down, met who's now my business partner, Fred Sheriffs, and he said, I knew you had cracked the code. This is things that the resolution industry had been trying to do. Got on with Fred. Fred's like, you are a programmer. I'm like, no, I'm not. And he proceeded to teach me how to make the code better. And over a couple of years, I learned how to start selling it, build it to where I could sell it. And the rest is kind of history. It changed TDN's world. That was right after J.K. Harris and Ronnie Deutsch and everybody had gone out of business.
Yes.
And a year and a half after all that happened, Tax Defense Network, who was the only company running Audit Detective at the time, they were able to sell themselves for $55 million when all their competitors were going out of business because they couldn't manage the caseload. And if I knew better, I would have negotiated something in there and maybe taken an early payout and headed to the Caribbean. But
there's a whole bunch of things I wish I would have done, like even buy $10 worth of Bitcoin 20 years ago or something. No, I just remember learning about tax help software, signing up for the free user account for 30 or 60 days, whatever you guys were offering. And then I connected up to eServices. And I remember whenever I went into eServices, it'd just take me an hour to download a bunch of transcripts. And it was just a pain in the neck. And I think in 10 minutes, I had probably downloaded 100 transcripts for different clients, and I was sold from day one. I mean, in the first 10 minutes, I basically paid for the cost of the entire year of software. And,
we didn't charge enough. That I learned later.
I know. And I shouldn't have said that because maybe you'll adjust our fees again. But nonetheless, it's such an integral part of our technology stack today. We use tax help software for everything. And then, of course, you and I went through the days of people trying to steal your software and things. But what do you see the greatest value of the software today being? What are you hearing from the practitioners out there, the CPAs, attorneys, and enrolled agents that are actually using this thing?
So there's a split. There's the tax community and the resolution community. Resolution, you can't do it without it. I mean, I guess you could, but in tax, it's the predictive. It's the detecting audits 6 months in advance. It's doing a CP 2000 check as soon as the wage and incomes are available, as early as May.
Right.
It's allowing
it's
people
as early as May now. I always thought that a lot of stuff wasn't till maybe August, particularly on K1s and things. But
so they do make them available in May, and we'll show you underreported stuff as early as May. But things keep coming in, so you're going to see a lot of over-reporting, especially on your K1 people, your S corps. You're going to get, because they always show up late. Like I haven't done my return. My CPA is kind of running behind, and we're on extension, and well, we haven't filed our return yet either. So my K1s are on. So
okay, so you're seeing that the CP 2000 potential is popping up early. I don't know what you want to call it, but you're running a CP 2000 check if you're a practitioner, and that'll give you at least the heads up that there's a discrepancy, a misreporting on the tax return. And so it gives you advance notice so that you can amend the return with your client and then avoid the penalties. Is that basically the value proposition?
Yeah, just twofold. You're reaching out to them to say, hey, look, something was underreported. When you call them, it's their fault. When they call you and they get a letter and audit, it's your fault, no matter what. So
even if they didn't give me the documents, it's always my fault.
It's really hard to defend when you call up and go, hey, you forgot to give me a 1099. Why don't you come in? If you don't come in, you're going to have 25% underreporter penalties. It's going to be a whole thing. And accuracy-related penalties do not apply if you can get the amended in before the letter goes out.
And I'll tell you where we see a lot of CP 2000 notices inevitably, and a lot of them come to us because somebody else prepared them, and we just happen to be really good at tax resolution in our firm. But it tends to be on the big items, particularly a 1099-R. So they got a distribution from some retirement or pension plan. Maybe it was an inherited IRA or something, and they just didn't put it on their tax return because they didn't think they had to. And so now we've got to address it. And as you say, there's an underreporter penalty. In terms of the tax resolution industry, what's that value to them? I mean, I know, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, so the biggest thing is the case follow-up, twofold. The first is onboarding. You can get that complete snapshot. You can understand what they owe for their businesses, their individuals, the relationship between them. That used to take a day or more.
Right.
And you now have that complete. You can literally tell somebody what you're going to charge them 20 minutes after you download the transcripts,
As soon
because you
as-
still have
as soon
to
as it's
digest the
available.
report a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. As soon
Yeah,
as it's available, you can engage.
Yeah, so if I could summarize what I see the value as, and you correct me, Roger, but when we onboard a client, our first stage is kind of a due diligence investigative stage. So we're trying to understand the problem through not just the client's perspective, because they have one view, and that's not always 100% correct, as we know, but I also want to understand what the problem is from the IRS perspective. So inevitably, back in the old days, I used to take a power of attorney. I'll call it a POA going forward, but I'd take a power of attorney and I always add a year or two on the front end, and I'd add years after just to keep it kind of open for a couple of years while I kind of monitor the situation. But to gather all of the information from a bunch of wage and income transcripts and account transcripts and everything was just a ton of work, and I was building spreadsheets for this. So I'd build a spreadsheet on the balances owed, on the penalties and the interest accruals and everything. And now, once I clear CAF, which that's the big deal right now, we should talk about that, but once I clear CAF, all of that comes into a single report format. So first thing I look at is what's the balance due for every year. Another thing I look at is what we call the CSED date. That's the collection statutory end date or expiration date. I look at the RSED dates. I look at the ASED dates, which is how long they have to assess certain things. I'm looking at, is there a penalty abatement opportunity for first-time penalty abatement? I'm looking at, rarely am I looking at the bankruptcy calculations, but if I'm working with a bankruptcy attorney and he wants to know what's eligible for, throwing into the bankruptcy, then I have that dashboard as well. But in my mind, it gives me such a complete granular view of a new tax resolution client that's kind of our first turnaround, is I'm giving them a PDF report that I've produced through tax help software, and then I'm going through the individual items and I'm explaining to them what I think our next step is, whether it's an offer and compromise, an installment agreement, partial payment agreement, or maybe even a penalty relief case. So is that pretty much how you see the value, or you hear it communicated to you from a tax resolution?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the first part. Matter of fact, that's what J.K. Harris and everybody got in the biggest amount of trouble for. They were taking money and not even getting through the investigative phase because it took so long.
Yeah.
And that was the first part. The second part was tracking the case.
Yeah.
Has it reached a resolution? Because honestly, resolution is fairly straightforward. And generally you can get most cases wrapped up in your average straightforward. You could even get an OIC generally submitted in 4 to 6 weeks on the upper end.
Yeah.
But you're waiting a year, 2 years,
exactly.
and you want to
Especially
see things that come in.
Yeah, especially now.
Especially now. And I will throw this out based on what you said. The worst person you can talk to about a tax problem is the client. I used to tell people the longer you talk to your client, the less money you make.
Yeah, and I'm going through quickly and qualifying the client, so if they're telling me what they think the problem is, and they say I owe a lot of money to the IRS, quickly I'm saying, what assets do you have? Do you have any home equity? Do you have a 401k or an IRA? Do you have any other assets? Tell me about your income. If they tell me, well, I got about $500,000 a year in income, then I know probably an offer and compromise is out. Doesn't mean it's out, but it's probably out. But as soon as I kind of do a quick down and dirty on what are their assets, and I know what the equity and assets are, and I get an idea of their income, I know I'm thinking in the back of my mind, I've got an offer candidate or I don't, or I've got an installment agreement candidate. And if they tell me, well, my balance is, say $300,000, I probably am going to have to do a financial disclosure for some revenue officer. So even though I'm not going to give them a conclusion right off, I'll at least know kind of where this is headed as I'm writing up the case and while I'm waiting for CAF checks. So this is a great transition, and where I wanted to spend a little bit of time. That was one thing that was really interesting about using the software is back in the good old days, we could do electronic authorization. Then in about 2014, the IRS took it away from the industry, even at the protest of the AICPA and other major trade industry organizations. And they promised that they'd do it quicker, better, faster. They said, it'll be done in 3 to 5 days. And we said, there's no way that's going to happen. And I don't think, personally, I've spoken with the commissioner's office about it. I don't think that's been the case for the last 3 years, at least in my experience.
No, I've got a chart somewhere, and it shows.
Do you?
Yeah, actually, we tracked it as best we could. I looked at old emails. I did it about a year and a half ago, and have been tracking it accurately. The government shutdowns, I think there have been two in the past 5 years. Yeah. As soon as the government shutdowns hit, we went over a week. Yeah. And for the most part, in the past 5 years, you're looking at 10 to 15 days, almost 2 weeks on CAF.
Yeah, that's what I would tell people, 2 to 3 weeks. That's what I was telling them pre-COVID.
2020 hit, and it went to 3 to 4 months.
Exactly. And I know the commissioner's office is aware of it, but I know you're talking with the team there, but what are you hearing from them these days? So what we're talking about, guys, is once you submit your power of attorney, which we do by fax all the time. So as soon as we get the signed form, we're faxing it off to the central authorization file.
Okay, so stop doing that. I got something that'll help you with that.
Yep. And then I tell the client, I'm building in the expectation. This is going to take a while before we can even get your, transcripts downloaded and give you kind of our initial delivery point, which is this full report on everything from your CSED dates to your balance due. So talk to me about how you streamline that process.
Gotcha. So 3 ways. So first off, I want the audience to know you can always fax a power of attorney or an 8821 to practitioner hotline and get up to 10 transcripts. So if somebody's like, I'm under levy, the ROs,
we've done that, by the way.
And remember, if you do something more expeditiously, like I used to tell people when I practice, if you go to the head of the line, you pay for that privilege.
Right.
So those clients charge more, so charge accordingly. 2, the fax method, I recommend against that anymore. So there's 3 methods. There's fax, digital upload, and the one being released supposedly next week. Haven't seen it yet, but my understanding is...
I've been hearing that for about 7 years now.
Yes, it'll be the online POA in the Tax Pro account. So I'll step as quickly as I can through all 3. Faxing, probably 4 weeks plus right now, maybe 5 weeks. The upload portal is new as of earlier this year, and they made it so you could upload digital signatures. You cannot fax a digital signature, but you can upload a digital signature.
I heard there were some problems with this, though. So talk to me about the problems.
So far, the only problem that I'm aware of is if you get a digital signature, you've taken off the ability to contact practitioner hotline because they will not accept a digital signature. So if you need transcripts instantly, the e-signatures are out. E or digital signatures are not an option.
But how quickly will they process the 8821 or the 2841 if I'm uploading it in this new portal?
It's faster than fax. We've had reports anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks.
That's still slow, though. I mean,
how do we
communicate that to the IRS? I mean, I remember electronic authorization. You'd have them fill out the form, and then I'd hit submit. I'd scan the form, so I had a copy of it, and I was live in 10 minutes.
So that's what
I even get
the
the 3
option.
to 5 days that they promised me in 2014. Is that just not ever going to happen again?
Poor John.
Do they recognize the problem? I mean,
so I will say this: I heard the head of customer service. They have hired a lot of staff for CAF, and they are starting to make progress. It's come down.
Have they learned nothing that say software works better than people, particularly as relates to the IRS? I don't know. It's I don't think you'll ever get a scale. You can add more people, but we haven't seen the problem improve. We've seen it only deteriorate from 2014.
But don't forget, government employees are union employees. Well, and that's one of the hurdles that we've heard is you would get rid of good union jobs to replace. Could this be automated by a computer? Yeah. Yes, I could develop a computer that could talk to CAF in a day, 2 days. I mean, the code's already there. Yeah. It's just the interface that triggers it.
Because I find it interesting that the IRS will allow me to get a signature and on an 8879 and then trust me with electronic filing and file the tax return, but they won't trust me with a power of attorney like I used to be trusted. And it seems almost from my perspective that they don't want people to be represented by the tax community when they need to be represented.
So the biggest shift I think that's affected this industry is after 2014, the IRS went away from, we're going to take Jon Miller, a CPA's word that he got a signature. We're going to take Roger Nemeth, an enrolled agent. We're no longer going to take them at their word that they have a signed power of attorney. There were some TIGTA studies and, there were some Jon Millers and Roger Nemeths that didn't keep all their power of attorneys forever, but they were faxed to the IRS, and the IRS had a record of them. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe they were thrown out, maybe they weren't, maybe they were there, but they were there. There's been, as far as I know, not one proven case where a Circular 230 EA, CPA, or attorney has ever used e-services for nefarious reasons or identity theft. Turn that around to Google IRS employee identity theft, and there's several hundred cases.
The biggest case of identity theft in the history was an inside job at the IRS.
Yes, it's even in the IRM.
Exactly.
There's documentation in the IRM. So the IRS employees are actually the weak point in the system, but yet what they decided was they were no longer going to trust John and Roger to look at somebody and say, "Yep, you're my client. I'm going to fax this in, and you don't need proof of a signature."
I think we took it more seriously than even an 8879 and filing electronically a return. I scanned every single POA before I ever clicked submit in e-services, and I'll tell you, nothing but slowing down the process has occurred. And I actually think, not just in terms of staffing in the CAF unit, but I think it slowed the whole collections process down.
Oh, and purposely. You know, if you've seen the online shift at the IRS on the taxpayer's account, you can now do an online payment agreement in the taxpayer account. You can now see a copy of all your notices. You can't see all that in the Tax Pro account. Now, you're supposed to be able to access online payment.
By Tax Pro, you're talking about e-services, or you're talking about this new?
So these are the new accounts that they just created. The Tax Pro account is next week. The taxpayer account's been out for about 2 years.
Right.
It is actually on the books for them to add a collection information statement similar to the online payment agreement to the taxpayer account. The speculation is, and I've been in this industry for a long time, is that the IRS is trying to bypass a tax professional.
And I think that's largely because they get a worse result when a tax professional is involved, because we know the law, we know the IRM, we know what's available to the taxpayer, and they don't want to deal with us, is my conclusion.
Well, and it's more expensive per case. They have the numbers of, if John Miller or Roger Nemeth represents a client, it's X number of dollars higher than if somebody self-represents, because they don't know how to appeal. They don't know. It's just they don't know
that they don't know what's an excluded asset on a CIS. They don't know what the standards are and when you can go outside of standards. They don't know the rules and they've never read the collection handbook in the IRS.
They don't know the best practices that we've learned over time. You've got good tax preparers, bad tax preparers.
I would argue that's true of many revenue officers and ACS personnel, that they don't even know those things. So it's often that I'm not just educating the taxpayer, but I'm educating the RO.
And then they're having massive retirements right now at the IRS.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy.
Well, let me throw this out. So the Biden administration has talked about adding like one figure is $40 billion to the IRS. Yeah. But here's the problem. The IRS, and remember a time when you had to line up to get a federal job? I mean, it was tough to get a federal job. Yeah. They advertised for 2,000 positions and ended up only having 900 applicants. The IRS did. Recently.
Wow. And I'll bet they didn't hire all 900 either.
Because they probably took better offers.
And there are probably many that didn't even clear the background checks. They weren't even suitable for employment. Because I understand if you've ever been late on a tax return, you're not getting hired at the IRS. So, it's interesting when you say what the Biden administration wants to do with, hiring revenue agents. I've actually had really a positive experience with revenue agents. I feel like that's a more knowledgeable community. We represent a lot of people under exam, and they seem to be more knowledgeable. But on the collection side, the revenue officers, that's where I felt the real deficiency in training and knowledge of the IRM and the tax laws has been. And so I don't necessarily, and this isn't a political statement, I don't see the need for more revenue agents. I actually see a need for more training of the collection staff and probably replenishing that group and hiring people in the collections area, because the IRS does have a lot of unpaid taxes that have already been assessed to people's accounts, and they're just kind of sitting there.
So the IRS has actually worked on a project. There wasn't a bid for it. They said if there was something off the shelf, they would buy it. And I'm like, right here. Yeah. One of the things they're working on is a collectability score. So the way the IRS works is they kind of look at what's owed and work what's owed by dollar amount down. But the problem is, if
That's not always the
50%
best
of your
method,
top
though.
cases,
Yeah.
they're retired or cancer patients, you're not going to get anything out of
Right.
them. What
Right.
the IRS wants to start doing is a logarithm of, they're going to do a collectability score based on an asset report from LexisNexis, a credit report, and the last couple of tax returns, because they'll know how much you
Yeah.
make, what
Right.
your assets are. They're basically going to do an automated collection statement, and they're based, hey, look at John Miller makes, $35,000 a year, and why am I going to try to get $2 million off of him? Whoa, Roger's making $45 million a year and has $10 million in assets. Let's go
Right.
after him. Yeah, I
Right.
wish.
And I actually think that's smart. If they could put some AI into the collection balances, I think that'd be great. Why not put the AI into 2848? I don't sound like a burned CPA, but I still go back to, we had electronic authorization, and yet we don't now.
If you let Jeff Bezos take over the front end of the IRS,
Yeah.
it would be an automated process, and
Front
it
to
would
back.
be
Yeah.
front to back. It would just be, your appeal process would be, okay, tomorrow the appeals officer will see you at 5:00.
Yeah.
Because it's commercial versus government. Government is never in a hurry
To come out
until
with
they
a
are.
reasonable solution. Yeah. And I think that if they just made some investments in technology, you probably wouldn't have to add all the people that they want to add, and that they can't, because they can't get enough people to even apply for the job that are qualified, I'll bet. So,
You can no longer solve this problem with personnel. It's a technology problem.
and you and I with technology backgrounds have known that for years, but it's just going to have to change. So I'm just curious, you said they may automate the CIS statement. Do you see a time when perhaps tax help software might create a load for that? Just like we create a load for the transcripts from the IRS, could we create a load where we push the data to the IRS from?
So the problem is, the IRS has to say, we're going to give you access. And like we had an interface with Get Transcripts. Well, that no longer works, because the IRS said, nope, if you're a software, you have to go through an API portal. So now what they've done is, anything automated at the IRS, you have to now go through this automated portal. They then tell you what you have access to.
Gotcha.
Could I program something? Absolutely. But they have a bot blocker that'll block you. And you basically have to fake being a human being.
Well, and isn't that kind of what happened? They kind of blocked everybody from downloading transcripts a few years ago, and that's what brought about the checkbox for using a third-party software provider on the POA. Roughly, I don't remember what it was. What was it?
It was the 7216 issue. We had a couple of competitors who came into the marketplace, and I said, whatever you do, don't build it in the cloud. Starting in 2012, the IRS said, if you build this in the cloud, we're going to shut it down. Because once our users have downloaded, I conservatively tell people 250 to 300 million. I got my first report from the IRS of just an API on a day that they were having problems. Our users, by 1:00 on a Tuesday, when the IRS was having problems in a non-peak time, had downloaded 400,000 transcripts.
Oh man,
in half a day. So we're guessing that there's over 1 million a day, just our users, and probably we're responsible for most of the downloads, just based on who our users are.
What do you think you're responsible for? 70%, 60% of all the downloads? What do you guess from what you see in the industry?
I think 80 to 90%. Wow. Our first competitor didn't have bulk request until 18 months ago.
Right.
And I didn't realize it. I just assumed that they were able to do bulk. You had to download.
That's what sold me on you from the beginning, was a bulk request. I just couldn't believe it when I downloaded. I'll bet with the first one I did, I did a CAF check first, it cleared, and then I downloaded, 20, 30 transcripts, and I was so excited. So I downloaded a bunch more. Then I played with the report, and before I knew it, I was a loyal user forever.
Actually 2 years ago, they brought us into the API program, and they wouldn't tell us how many transcripts we could download. They said, when you reach the magic number, we're going to cap you and log you out for 15 minutes, and you got to relog back in. And I'm thinking, is that 2,000? Is it 3? They're like, it's classified. I'm like, as soon as you turn the system on, I'm going to know what the limit is. Yeah. So during testing, I'm downloading 180, 190,000 an hour. Wow. It used to take us, we were lucky to get 18,000 transcripts in 24 hours in the old system.
Interesting.
It was now I don't have it built out in production for 180,000 an hour. We did throttle it back to 25,000 because all several thousand of our users doing a $250,000 every hour and a half was not going to hold water. So we backed it off, and we're slowly upping. But honestly, most people get what they need in less than 45 minutes now, because that's used to take 3 days.
I have one staff member, her name's Tier, and that's what she's dedicated to doing. So she runs CAF checks once a day. We see who clears. We do reports. We download the transcript. She does it all. And it literally doesn't take her hardly any time at all. And every once in a while I'll have a call and I'll say, hey, I'll just call Bill Jones. It's not a real client. But I'll say, hey, can you pull a current set of transcripts for Bill Jones and give me a transcript analysis? That's the report we use the most. And it's done in 5-10 minutes. It's just fantastic, unless the IRS is down. And I'll bet you guys know before anybody that e-services or something is down.
Yeah, and here's what's crazy.
Else.
So our phone rings before theirs does, because theirs is a 30 to 40 minute hold time.
Right.
We have begged them to say, let me reach out to you when we're having issues.
Right.
Because I know. I know. I'm the first one to know.
Give me the cell phone and I'll let you know. Yeah.
and we have back end contacts, and they just have no stomach for it. They don't want. They're like, let it. They make me call in and report through the e-help desk, and sometimes I'll call e-help desk. No, there have been documented
the same door that we have to.
There was a time last year where the system was down for over 6 hours, and finally,
I remember that day.
Well, there were several of them, but I kept reaching out to IRS going, and they're like, we don't have any reports to the help desk. So I called the help desk, and I'm like, I have 412 reports of this happening, and they're like, how big is your office? Well, we can only take one because Roger Nemeth only has one login.
Amazing.
And I said, look. Elevate me to tier 2, and the person, I'll ask them, and they're like, well, we don't have a tier 2, and I'm like, look, please don't insult me. Just elevate me to tier 2. Do you want me to give you the list of names of people that work in tier 2?
Yeah.
I
even remember dumb things like, when they switched over to where you had to use the application to get the code to log on.
I like that. I was all about that.
I agree, but here's the deal. Sometimes the codes were wrong, right? And so you'd enter the code and it would not recognize it. You do it again, it didn't recognize it. And you're doing it in real time, and then you get locked out for 24 hours. Oh,
yeah, so part of the problem for people having that issue, restart your phone, because if the clock goes out of sync.
That's what we learned to do, is restart it.
and do the text message and the app. If the text message fails, flip to the app. If the app fails, go to the text message. Yeah. We've gotten better at working our way around, but usually things get mistimed. Where it got real tricky was when the IRS got out of time, and it didn't matter what anybody else did. And a lot of people got locked out. So
anything you can share with us on what you see tax help software doing in the near term, or are you keeping that under wraps right now?
No, I'll put it out there because we just kind of launched it. It's kind of the joint venture with Tax Help Software and Tax Mentor.
Okay.
Like what you said that you like to do with the report right off the bat is you like to go through and figure out the strategy for the case.
Right.
I hired an experienced tax attorney by the name of Catherine O'Connor, who I've worked with decade ago.
She's pretty sharp.
Yeah, very sharp. And actually, it was a little less than a decade ago. I met her at Tax Defense Network. And in the time since I had been around her, I knew she was sharp back then. When I started looking for a good tax professional that had a good background to help me with this, she came on board at Tax Mentor. And what Tax Mentor is doing is we're creating consultations off the report. What we found is not everybody's as smart as Jon Miller with as much experience, and even with all that data at your fingerprints or at your fingertips, you still don't know what to do with the case. Catherine will actually come out and go through some of the things that John had talked about, like are they compliant is the first thing that we look at, because if they're not compliant, you don't know what the debt is until you get them compliant. The next thing we look at is CSED, because if the CSED expires next year or in 3 months, it dictates how you're going to work the case.
Yep. No question. It dictates. In fact, I had a case where I had a CSED. It was over $100,000 that was going to expire in 6 months. And so I pulled the old equivalent hearing. So I didn't run the statute, or I didn't toll the statute. I was running it out. I've never had an RO smart enough to know that until
But not
this
intentionally.
case.
You weren't
Until
doing that to
this
delay.
case.
You weren't doing that to delay. You were doing it so you could get your day in equivalency.
Exactly. And so I did the equivalent hearing on this one, and I got a wise RO, and she called my bluff, and she said, "You're just trying to run the statute out." And I said, "Listen, you could have that equivalent hearing next week if you wanted to, but here's the deal. The guy would qualify for CNC anyway, so we gave her a financial disclosure, a full CIS, and she closed the case, currently not collectible, and it expired out on the CSED. So it was funny, but
it got her
I've never
attention.
had an RO that called me on an equivalent hearing and knew exactly what was going on. Most of them aren't aware of, they don't even know what the word tolling a statute is. They don't even know that half the time.
Well, it's a lost art. Apparently in the 70s, you used to be able to call up and they'd work a CSED on a piece of paper. Now, half of them don't even know what a CSED, and not insulting. I think it comes down to training and inexperience, but they just don't understand what it is. Oh, the CSED's what the computer
and that's
says it
one
is.
thing I really like about the software is I think you do a better job than the IRS of estimating what the CSED and the ASED are.
Oh, it's been proven.
And the
head to head,
bankruptcy statute and everything. I mean, I love it because I got the 3-year, 2-year, everything's calculating with the tolling, and I know what to expect. And half the time when I pull transcripts and I see the CSED is different, like on a tax mod A, which I haven't had to pull in years, I just don't pull it anymore because everything's beautifully calculated for me on a transcript analysis. I think you guys do a better job.
Oh, we do. We're well over 98%. Now, we also identify the issues like the installment agreements that weren't done correctly. There's all kinds to this. But one of the other things that we did last year on the software has been kind of a game changer. We actually calculate where each payment goes on which assessment in the proper order. In order to calculate an installment agreement accurately, you have to make sure the payments are applied to each assessment. So not even each year, but each assessment within the year, and then it goes tax, penalty, interest in that order. So we did that calculation, and then using the accurate CSEDs, we give you an installment agreement amount based on the CSED, 72 months and 84 months. Now, when we do 72 and 84 month calculations, we still adjust if the CSEDs are less than that. So we're giving you accurate, how much the client can expect to pay. We're pretty close to the IRS numbers, but if their CSEDs are way off from ours, you'll see a huge discrepancy.
Well, and in the accrued column, I think you call it accrued, but not assessed. So, the assessed is always less than the accrual amount. I like that because sometimes I'll be on the phone with an RO or with ACS and I'll say, what's the payoff amount? I'm looking right at that number, and it's amazing how often that's exactly dead on. And I love that feature about tax help software because I can pretty confidently say to my client, to pay it off, it's going to be about this much, but I'll call in and we'll get that payoff amount for you.
We've been getting reports recently from users that have dealt with ROs and other people at the IRS where if they're appealing a CSED, we got a call from a regular user the other day, and he said, it was wonderful. I called the RO and I said, look, I'm going to contest the CSED. It's already expired. And says, how do you know that? I ran software. It came up. It's
Here's
under. I verified it by hand.
Yeah.
Yep. He goes, send me what you got. What program was it? They said it was Tax Help Software. And he said, if Tax Help Software says it's this, then we're going to go ahead and accept it. Because think about it. His other option, or her, depending on who you're dealing with at the IRS, they have to go in and do all that by hand with CCalc, which is a horrible Excel spreadsheet. He's going to spend all day calculating that. If you put it all at his fingertips, he's going to go to a supervisor and say, do you want me to recreate this? I mean, this is all the data. Do you see anything where they've missed it or they're wrong? If not, take it and move on.
Now, I'll tell you, I've used your software for a very unusual approach recently. I had a client come to me because a major tax resolution firm that shall be unnamed for purposes of this, basically he hired them, paid them $20,000 to do all this work, and all they did was file 4 easy tax returns. And so I was able to pull the transcripts with the software very efficiently and show what they, and I'll just say didn't do. And they actually missed a 30-day deadline on a notice of levy, which I couldn't believe. And I called them on it. I said, and they're like, we did everything. I said, you did nothing, and I've got the proof. It's actually a circular 230 violation here, here, and here. And who misses a 30-day deadline on a notice of levy? You fully missed it. So we've got no CDP hearing rights. We can do an equivalent hearing, but you missed it. And so the taxpayer is actually demanding a refund of, and I told them they should ask for 15 of the 20,000 because they legitimately did some tax returns, but there's no way anyone would find value approaching 5,000, but let's go to 5,000. And they offered to settle for 10, and the firm came back and said, no, we'll settle for 5. And what they don't realize that I've talked about with them is the client's actually going to file, with OPR. So they're not talking about suing the firm. They're going to go to OPR and say, look what they did. And this is a firm that I know has been at OPR before. And so it's going to be kind of ugly for them. But we've used it to basically show the client what the other firm, and I that's not my predisposition, but in this case, the fee was so egregious, the neglect was so egregious that we're actually helping them to recover the fees that they've paid to this firm who didn't do the work. I hope I didn't mention the firm name.
Yeah, we've had clients that have assisted with E&O claims against bankruptcy attorneys who filed 1 or 2 days late. It doesn't matter how you solve the case, and I'm not saying get litigious.
And I'm not either. I'm not a litigious guy at all. But this was neglect, gross neglect for that matter.
You are representing your client. If somebody screwed them over, and there's an opportunity for you to lessen the impact of their bad situation, by all means. I would, the other thing I would look at.
We resolved their problem in 2 weeks.
Well, and that's not going to bode well when it goes to OPR. But the other one that folks are scared about is the an E&O claim.
Yeah.
Because you only get so many E&O claims, you're never getting E&O insurance again.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a fascinating thought. So let's shift gears and let's talk about what we're doing together in August 17th to 19th. We're running a partnership boot camp. We're co-sponsoring that with you guys. Is that under the Tax Help Software umbrella, or is that this new firm, Tax Mentor?
No, so all education's now in Tax Mentor, and we need to describe it. The partnership is the description of the topic, not the partnership between
exactly. Yeah. Right. And what we're doing, guys, is we've seen this year and talked about it at length with Roger, but starting about a year or two ago, when there were some partnership changes. For example, you have to include basis statements now with most partner tax returns. We were noticing that basis was way off, not even close to being calculated right. We noticed even that the ending partnership capital account was different than the beginning one on the following K1. We were just seeing massive mistakes in the partnership arena. And that happened because we were taking over new business, either individuals that had multiple partnership interests, or we were taking over the whole partner. And what I found is I love partnerships because partnerships represent great clients. You have not only the partnership itself, but you also have access to a group of partners who usually have fairly substantial income, depending, and the partnership return is a complicated return. I think it's one of the most complicated areas of taxation, and we're just seeing a lot of mistakes. And I think it's an opportunity to really up our game as an industry and teach people how to handle the taxation of partnerships and partners. Anything to add to that, Roger?
I think the IRS is going to start coming after partnerships and 1120S's. Let me rephrase that. It's not just I know it; they've said it. They're coming. I can tell you, I've been in this industry a long time. People hide stuff in partnerships and S corps, and when they come,
there's a lot of promoters that are saying, you don't want to be a Schedule C business, so put it in an S corp because your chances for audit go way down. That's true, but I think just the idea that you have to attach a basis statement is a game changer for the IRS, because they're going to notice if it's done right. They're going to see that there are partners and shareholders of S corps who are taking distributions in excess of their basis, and that's a taxable event.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to be this is where the dollars are, in my opinion. Now, unfortunately, they're going to start doing this right when small business is at its worst point. So they're going to end up coming after some people that aren't going to survive.
Right.
Catherine had a great line just today.
Yeah.
Catherine, my partner, we were talking. She goes, what people don't understand when you're working a real business resolution case,
Yeah.
the goal isn't the best outcome. The goal is just to let the business survive. Because generally in a business resolution, they're so bad. It's either, is it worth saving or is it not worth saving? And that's it's not, oh, am I going to owe a little bit less or a little bit more like you do with an individual? It's, is this a viable business? Is it going to survive with this big error?
And I've actually had those conversations with both agents and revenue officers where, hey, let's zoom out from the problem and let's talk about this in terms of jobs. What's the right answer? I'm one of the few guys that's actually done an offer in compromise for a business. Most people don't know you can do it for the business too. I've actually done it, and man, it's mind blowing. It is 10 times as complicated as doing an individual offer, because you have things like inventory and machinery and equipment and all kinds of other stuff, and it's fascinating to talk to the revenue officers assigned to those kinds of cases in the OIC, because a lot of them are former ROs that are in the OIC department, and they've never seen a business OIC either. So it's a fascinating process. But I do think that at some level there are a group of IRS employees that actually don't even care whether they save the business or not. So sometimes that requires a manager level discussion. What's the right answer here, guys?
And I was going to point out, I've heard the horror stories of, frankly, I don't care if the business survives.
I've actually had a revenue officer tell me that. So what? We want to punish these guys.
Yeah, and your next line is manager meeting. Something.
Exactly.
Let's, hey, apparently you haven't heard of taxpayer bill of rights. Let's,
Exactly.
if you've already got an outcome that's not in the best interest, we need to sit in front of somebody.
And so going on to why I think this is such a timely subject in terms of, and it's a partnership boot camp that we're offering from August 17th to the 19th. And you can sign up for it at privatetaxeducation.com, or I think TaxMentor, is it taxmentor.com? We'll have the links for you.
We've got some invites going out.
But I think it's going to be exciting because, our goal is to have Roger demo his software at some point, maybe during a lunch break or a breakfast part of this. But, what I'm seeing is there's a lot of mistakes being made out there. For example, I have actually seen this twice this year where CPAs and attorneys have put real estate in an S corporation. Guys, that's just bad news. That has bad news written all over it. In one case, I actually spoke with the CPA. She had no knowledge of why that was bad and why we only put real estate in partnerships or LLCs that become partnerships with more than one owner. She just heard that on Dave Ramsey, and Dave Ramsey's CPA recommended this. I doubt that, okay? I doubt that. But somehow she felt like the S-Corp was the right solution for real estate. We don't put real estate in S-Corps, almost never. In fact, I own the commercial building that Private Tax Solutions uses, and that's in a partnership with my wife and I, and we rent the building at Private Tax Solutions from that partnership because you totally mess up valid tax planning if you put that building in an S corporation. So there's things that are being done that we're seeing and we're having to clean up. And so I'm actually working with somebody right now on how to get her real estate out of her S corp. And it's a terribly complicated problem. But I'm seeing mistakes in basis, as I mentioned, in capital account calculations, in planning. And yet, this represents an incredible opportunity for a tax professional to develop some real strong fees, because there's a lot of planning opportunity with partnerships and S-Corps, but we're not going to talk about S-Corps in the boot camp. There represents not only planning for the partnership, but the partners. And candidly, the tax return fees for a partnership oftentimes for me exceed $5,000 because of the complexity. You add some, special allocations of income or deductions, you add some complicated partnership agreements, and suddenly you've got a lot of complexity that requires a lot of brain power, and that results and translates into fees, happy clients, tax planning opportunities. So it's my belief that we've priced this actually low for continuing education. We're offering 24 hours through this thing of continuing education, which meets a lot of professionals' needs for the year. But really, we're giving you more because we're giving you a business proposition. We're giving you the opportunity to go out and generate those fees. So I'm curious, Roger, you've said the IRS has indicated they're going to increase the audit on partnerships and S corps. How'd you hear this? Because I haven't heard that, but it's a fascinating subject.
I go to a lot of meetings and I just watch it. I could probably come up with the article somewhere, but it's out. They know there's money in businesses, and
I believe it. Yeah.
Well, and let me throw this out from what I know about transcripts. We always get people that call up and go, "Oh, the program's wrong. It doesn't show the distributions on the K1." And I'm like, "No, they're not on there."
Exactly.
Remember, if a data point is not on a transcript,
the
IRS can't analyze it in their audit detection.
Yeah.
If you look at an 1120S transcript, it's very hard, or even a partnership. There's not a lot of data there to figure out what happened. It's in the books is where it's at.
And I saw an industry report recently, or an article somewhere in some professional journal, that they found out, all of the complex lines in K1s, which, I've seen K1s with 200 separate line items, all kinds of things, rehab credits, R&D credits, oil and gas data, all kinds of complex, hard stuff. And they found out that until recently, the IRS could basically track just a few data points like ordinary income on the K1, which I thought, oh, you got to be kidding me. Because sometimes I say that the line item on the K1 costs more to resolve than what it's worth. And so sometimes we've just made the decision it's $1, but it costs $30 to input it and properly claim some bizarre credit. So sometimes I'll just have a conversation with a client. Do you really want this? No. And it turns out it didn't ever matter, ever. It didn't ever matter. So I think it's interesting that now I think the data processing capability on a K1, which is a substantial amount of work for a practitioner to even get to, because they've got to do all the partnership accounting right and then flow it through to the K1s. That capability to process that data is improving at the IRS. And as you say, I think it's going to create a lot of audit and exams as a result of that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find one of the articles here on it. I just saw something that 0.2% of partnerships.
It's pretty low.
Yeah, it's...
Now, I will say S Corps has already gone up. We've seen audits go up quite a bit, and I just closed out an S Corporation audit, and the number one items that they covered were reasonable compensation, which in our technology stack, we use RC reports, and that's a must too, just like tax help software. Use of cars. They disallowed all of the guys' car and auto use before I got involved. We got it mostly back. Those were big items, and I can see those are going to be major audit triggers going forward because we've now handled multiple S Corp audits, and those seem to be very consistent issues. Reasonable compensation to the S Corp owners and the use of cars and deduction of car expenses.
Just to give you real quick, in 2019, the chance of an audit for an S Corp or partnership is 0.22%, and it's trending downwards. And they mention about with all the retirees at the IRS, it's a very special person that can audit businesses because it's not, you're not going to hire somebody off the street tomorrow and have them auditing.
But I guarantee those audits, because I've handled them, those audits, the auditors that are assigned to it, they can talk the talk, and they know the complexity, they know the issues, and they're asking all the hard questions, the questions I don't want them to ask, they're asking it. So, you better be managing it right because you sure don't want to pay prepare penalty on something that big. But anyways, I did want to announce we are doing this Partnership Bootcamp. Again, it's going to be August 17th to the 19th. Go to privatetaxeducation.com or taxmentor.com. Sign up. There's an early bird, registration, and you'll get 24 hours of continuing education credit for our event. Roger, anything we've got to wrap this up pretty quick, but anything you want to add to anything we've talked about today?
I'm just going to put out there that what I've seen in the industry is business returns are not done properly. S Corps, partnerships, and when John said this was his idea, I just don't see these classes. I see people do 1 hour on partnership. What are you going to learn in an hour on partnership?
Nothing.
I'll tell you right now, John does our books at Tax Help Software. I haven't moved Tax Mentor over yet just because
Yeah.
it's a new corporation and we're
Now,
getting it off
now
the
you
ground.
divulged that. I did not.
Yes, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
but part of it was Laura and I struggled every year just trying to get our basis to match. I'm an EA and so is she. We're not experienced in this, but we always tried to do things right. Our books were meticulous, but even importing the stuff in, we had trouble matching our stuff every year. And it's not our strong point. But finally, I'm like, I'm going to pay somebody. And John called me up, said he's going to do a boot camp on this. And I'm like, you need me as a client. So,
well, and we were able to reconcile those numbers, I'll just add. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot, Roger. It was really, I've enjoyed working with Roger over the years. And it's always fun to have a guy to bounce stuff off of, particularly in the resolution industry because of your background and just the complex, hairy stuff going on. But be sure to check out this event. We're excited to be working with Tax Help Software on this as sponsors. And I've always been excited to work with Roger and his team. They've done a fantastic job. And I will just put in a plug for Tax Help Software. If you're not using a software like this in your technology stack, there is such a strong need for you to do it. And I just don't see how we could go without it as a firm at any time, because we need the data and the resources and the leverage that provides to our staff. It adds so much value into our practice. So, and they can sign up just by going to taxhelpsoftware.com.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say,
it's all automated. I don't do anything, but my office manager handles the renewal. But is that right?
Yeah, I was going to say, if anybody's interested, they can go to our website, taxhelpsoftware.com. We have a $250 for 6 months special. I don't have anything up on the website right now. Yeah, well, the goal is to get people to try it. So if you ever saw New Jack City, you give them the crack for free for the first 3 months, and then you start charging them.
I have not seen that, Roger. Okay. But it is addictive, no question.
But if you click the CPA Academy offer and then just put in here that, the Jon Miller class for a referral source, then I'll know it didn't come from CPA Academy. So
there you go.
You can listen to Roger on a webinar, and the 250 offers there if you're interested. And again, it's the value's a lot greater than 250. But
no question. Like I said, I earned our entire feedback the first day I used the software. That's how valuable it was to me.
Just on first-time penalty abatements that you'll get.
Oh, and I will say this, on first-time penalty abatements, it is not uncommon that we'll find one. In fact, I just did one the other day. I got a $4,000 penalty abatement for some guy. No, I'm sorry. It was a $9,000 penalty abatement. And all I did was I reviewed the transcript analysis with the guy online, on the phone. I think we were in a Zoom meeting and on the phone, perhaps at the same time or something. And I saw that and I said, hey, let's try something. I'm going to try and see if I can get you a penalty abatement. Guys, when you get somebody $9,000 of value, they are going to be your client for life. And we've done that over and over for clients using Tax Help Software. That is an amazing capability right there when you can see FPA ability. All right, Roger, I think our time is up. Good to be with you. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at Private Tax Solutions or Private Tax Education or Roger's company, Tax Help Software and Tax Mentor. And we'll let you go for now. I'll watch for the signal from Corey here to let you know, but so you may get us for a few more seconds, but it's good to be with you today. Thanks, Roger.